Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let us begin. As you settle in, allow your body to relax. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your breath. Let the sounds around you soften, becoming distant, as your mind opens to a space of peace and imagination. You find yourself on a winding path through a quiet bamboo forest. The air is cool, carrying the soft, hollow sound of the wind through the tall stalks. After a short walk, the path opens into a clearing where a simple wooden cottage sits beside a still pond. This is the home of Master Li, a teacher known for his unwavering calm. As you watch, a villager bursts into the clearing, his face flushed with anger. He shouts about a neighbor who has wronged him, his voice sharp in the tranquil air. Master Li listens, seated on a flat stone, his expression as placid as the pond's surface. When the man finishes, breathless, Master Li nods slowly. "You have carried this fire a long way," he says softly. "Would you like to set it down before it burns you?" The villager blinks, confused. "But he deserves my anger." "Perhaps," Master Li replies. "But does your anger deserve you? Look." He points to the pond. The man's angry reflection is there, distorted and wavering. Master Li tosses a small pebble into the water. The reflection shatters into ripples and disappears. When you hold a burning coal to throw at another, the master whispers, "You are the first to be burned. Your peace is this water. Let the stone of your grievance fall through, and watch as the stillness returns." The villager stares at the water as the ripples fade, and his own face, now calm, reappears. He takes a deep breath, his shoulders dropping. He bows to Master Li and walks away, his steps slower, quieter. The lesson was not about the neighbor. It was about what he chose to carry, and what he could choose to release. In a small, sunlit workshop, a young carpenter named Elian struggles. He is building a cabinet, but no matter how carefully he measures, the doors hang unevenly. He grows frustrated, his movements becoming rushed and forceful. A splinter digs into his palm. He curses, throwing his hammer down with a clatter. His grandfather, the master carpenter, enters. He says nothing, simply picks up the hammer and places it back on the bench. Then he takes Elian's hand, removes the splinter gently, and hands him a simple wooden level. "You are measuring the wood," the old man says, "but who is measuring your mind? Your spirit is crooked with frustration. No tool can correct the work of a crooked spirit." He guides Elian to sit. "Breathe. Feel the imbalance within you. Do not fight it. Just acknowledge it, as you would a knot in the wood." Elian closes his eyes, feeling his own hurried breath, his tense jaw. As he sits, the internal noise begins to settle. After a time, his grandfather places the level in his hands again. "Now, measure." Elian returns to the cabinet. His hands are steady, his eye clear. He finds the problem, not in the doors, but in a subtly warped frame he had been forcing into place. He works patiently, adjusting, shaving, until the level's bubble rests perfectly in its center. The doors swing true. The grandfather smiles. "The most important tool," he says, "is not in your hands. It is the inner stillness that allows you to see what is, not what you wish it to be. Always level your mind before you level the wood. In a village known for its vibrant tapestries, a young weaver named Anya worked for months on her masterpiece. It was to be a gift for the temple, depicting a majestic mountain at sunrise. One evening, exhausted, she made a single, terrible error in the complex pattern. A streak of deep blue where there should have been gold. Heartbroken, she believed the work was ruined. She rolled it up and hid it in a corner, shrouded in shame. Weeks later, the elder weaver, a woman named Maris, found it. She unrolled the tapestry before Anya. "Show me the flaw," Maris said. Trembling, Anya pointed to the blue streak. Maris studied it for a long time. Then she took a spool of silver thread. "This is not a flaw," she said. "It is a river you did not yet see." With incredible skill, she began to weave outward from the blue streak, adding silver to suggest flowing water, green for its banks, tiny white threads for froth. The blue streak became the source of a beautiful river winding down from the mountain, making the sunrise seem more alive, more true to nature than the original design could have been. Anya watched in awe. "I saw an error," Maris said, her eyes kind. "You saw an ending. But the universe saw a new beginning." In life, we often call unexpected threads mistakes. But if we are brave and quiet, we can follow them and find they lead to a more interesting pattern than we ever planned. Do not discard the tapestry because of one unexpected color. Weave with it. At a remote mountain monastery, the pre-dawn ritual was the ringing of the great bronze bell. The task fell to a novice named Kenji, who took immense pride in it. He believed the perfect ring should be loud, clear, and shake the very mist from the valleys. He would swing the massive log with all his might, his muscles straining, to produce a thunderous deep bell tone. One morning, the abbot observed him. After the ringing, the abbot said, "Come." He led Kenji to a still forest pool. The abbot dropped a tiny pebble into the center. Gentle plink sound. A perfect set of rings expanded silently to the very edges. "That is the sound," the abbot said. Kenji was confused. "But it is almost silent, master." "The bell's voice is not in its shout," the abbot replied. "It is in the silence that follows. The clarity of the note that hangs in the air and travels unseen. You are ringing to impress the valley. You should ring to awaken the silence within it." The next morning, Kenji approached the bell differently. He centered himself, feeling the weight of the striker not as a burden, but as an extension of his own calm. He did not force it. He let it swing, guided by its own momentum, and connected with the bell in a single, pure moment. The bell sounds with a deep, resonant tone that hangs in the air. The sound was not louder, but profoundly deeper, clearer. It did not crash, it unfolded. It filled the monastery grounds and then seeped into the forest, a wave of pure tone. And as it faded, the silence that followed was richer, more profound than before. In that silence, Kenji understood. True power is not in force, but in resonance. The goal is not to break the quiet, but to deepen it with a single, perfect note. An elderly gardener named Finn tended two adjacent plots. The first was his pride, orderly rows of prized vegetables, perfectly weeded and staked. The second was a wild, tangled patch where he casually tossed seeds from his kitchen, leftover roots, and whatever fell from the birds. He lavished attention on the first plot, worrying over every pest, measuring water precisely. The wild plot he largely ignored. One season, a strange blight afflicted the orderly garden. Despite all his care, the plants grew sickly and weak. Despondent, Finn went to sit by the wild plot. To his astonishment, it was bursting with life. Hardy greens, vibrant flowers, and fat insects humming with purpose created a chaotic, thriving ecosystem. The plants he had discarded had taken root and supported each other. Marigolds he'd tossed away deterred pests. Bean stalks climbed corn stalks he'd left to rot. Nature had created its own perfect balance. The village elder walked by and saw him staring. "You see, Finn," the elder said, "you tried to command one garden with your mind. You let the other garden listen to its own wisdom. You can be the caretaker, or you can try to be the creator." The caretaker observes, supports, and gently guides. The creator struggles against 1,000 unseen forces. Your worry was a shadow over your prized plants. Your indifference allowed the wild ones to find the sun. Finn never again farmed the wild plot. He became its student, learning its partnerships and applying those gentle lessons to his orderly garden, which soon flourished again, not from control, but from cooperation. A renowned cartographer, Alastair, spent his life making flawless maps of the kingdom's lands. A young traveler, Leo, came to him before a journey into the northern forests, seeking the most accurate map. Alastair unrolled a masterpiece of ink and parchment. "Every trail, every stream, every elevation is here," he said proudly. Leo followed the map meticulously. But in the forest, he found a waterfall that wasn't marked. A landslide had erased a trail. A new bridge crossed a ravine. Frustrated and lost, he returned to Alastair. "Your map is wrong," he declared. Alastair was unperturbed. "The map is not wrong," he said calmly. "It is a portrait of the land on the day I saw it. The land is alive, Leo. It changes. The map is a memory. Your eyes are the present." He took a blank piece of parchment and handed it to Leo with a charcoal stick. "Go again. Do not follow the map. Let the map follow you. Draw what you see, not what you expect." Leo returned to the forest with empty eyes. He noticed the moss on the north side of trees, the way the birdsong changed near water, the gentle slope of the land. He drew his own simple, living map. He was never lost again, for he was not comparing the world to an idea of it, he was in conversation with the world itself. Alastair framed Leo's crude map next to his own elegant one. "This," he told students, "is the better guide. It holds humility. My map claims to know. His map remembers to learn." On a festival night, a child named Suki was given a beautiful paper lantern, painted with cranes in flight. She loved it dearly. Running to join the parade, she tripped. The lantern fell, the bamboo frame snapping, the paper tearing. The candle snuffed out. Suki sat in the dusty road, holding the shattered remains, weeping. Her grandfather found her there. He did not offer a new lantern. Instead, he sat beside her and picked up the pieces. "Ah," he said, holding the torn paper to the moonlight. "Look. Now the cranes are flying free of the lantern." He pointed to the broken frame. "And this bamboo can become a whistle, or a support for a new plant." He helped her gather every fragment. At home, they did not repair the lantern. From the paper, they made a delicate mobile of floating crane shapes. From the bamboo, they fashioned a small flute. The candle was saved for another night. The festival's light was not in the lantern, Suki, her grandfather said as the paper cranes turned slowly in the window breeze. "It was in your joy as you carried it. That joy is not broken. It simply changed form. We spend so much time protecting the container, we forget the light inside is unbreakable. Now, your cranes fly day and night. Is that not better?" Suki nodded, her tears drying, watching the shadows of the cranes dance on the wall. The loss had transformed into a different, lasting kind of beauty. On the banks of a wide, slow-moving river, an old boatman named Arlo ferried travelers across. One day, he carried 2 passengers on the same trip. The first was a scholar, hunched over a thick book, muttering arguments with its pages, his face tense. The second was a farmer, who sat quietly, watching the water, the sky, a heron standing still on a log. The scholar complained, "This journey is too slow. Can you not row faster? Time is precious." The farmer said nothing, only took a deep breath of the river air. A soft rain began to fall. The scholar groaned, hiding his book under his robe. "This miserable weather." The farmer extended a hand, catching droplets, a slight smile on his face. Halfway across, the wind picked up, rocking the boat gently. The scholar gripped the sides, pale. "We'll be capsized. Do something." The farmer adjusted his balance smoothly, his body moving with the boat's rhythm. Finally, they reached the other side. The scholar scrambled out, hurrying away without a word, already consumed by his next worry. The farmer stepped out calmly, turned to Arlo, and placed a ripe peach from his pocket into the boatman's hand. "Thank you," he said. "The river was beautiful today." As the farmer walked away, Arlo's young apprentice, who had been watching, asked, "Master, why was the first man so troubled and the second so peaceful?" "They took the same journey." Arlo bit into the sweet peach. "They did not take the same journey, boy," he said. The scholar was traveling across a river of problems. The farmer was traveling on a river of beauty. The boat is the same. The world is the same. But each man brought his own weather. Remember this, you are not just the boatman. You are also the passenger in your own mind. Choose which journey you wish to take. In a martial arts school famed for its powerful, rigid style, a young prodigy named Kaito arrived. He was strong, fast, and broke every training post he struck. His master, Sensei Ryoto, watched him for a month. Finally, he took Kaito to a grove of willow trees by a stream. Strike that branch, Ryoto said, pointing to a long, whip-like willow branch. Kaito took his stance and delivered a sharp, forceful punch. The willow branch yielded, bending away, then swept back to gently tap his cheek. Annoyed, Kaito tried a kick, then a series of quick strikes. Each time, the branch moved with the force, avoiding the impact, always returning to touch him. Exhausted and frustrated, Kaito bowed his head. "I cannot defeat it." "You are correct," said Ryoto. "You are trying to fight it like a stone post. The post resists, and so it breaks. The willow does not resist. It receives your force, accepts it, moves with it, and in doing so, exhausts you and remains unbroken. Your strength is great, but it is brittle. True resilience is not hardness, it is adaptability. The strongest oak branch snaps in the storm. The willow bends and is still there when the storm passes." Ryoto then placed a rigid wooden practice sword in Kaito's hand and faced him with only a slender, green willow switch. "Now, attack." Kaito swung with all his skill. The sensei did not block. His willow switch deflected the heavy sword with minimal touches, guiding its force away, always finding an opening to lightly tap Kaito's wrist, neck, or ribs. Kaito's powerful attacks became his own undoing, his strength used against him. He finally lowered his sword, understanding dawning. "Your anger, your fear, life's hardships, they are like your sword strikes," Ryoto said. "Do not meet them with rigid resistance. That is how you break. Meet them with mindful yielding. Acknowledge their force, move with it, and let it pass. What remains standing is not what is hardest, but what is most adaptable. This is the way of the willow heart." A great emperor, plagued by a feeling of confinement and unease in his vast palace, commissioned an artist to paint a mural that would bring him a sense of freedom. The artist, a wise old woman named Liang, asked for 1 year and a private chamber. The emperor expected a grand scene of soaring eagles or endless oceans. When the year was done, he entered the chamber. He was baffled. Liang had painted a single, exquisite bird sitting on a bare branch. The bird's feathers were rendered in breathtaking detail, but around it, she had painted the most delicate, beautiful bars of a cage, so fine they looked like strands of sunlight. The emperor was furious. "I asked for freedom. You have painted a cage." Liang bowed. "Walk closer, Your Majesty." Annoyed, the emperor stepped forward. As he neared the wall, his perspective shifted. He realized that the bars were not painted on the wall at all. They were thin, real threads of gold that Liang had strung across the mural. The bird was painted behind them. He moved his head slightly. The cage was an illusion, the threads were only visible from certain angles. From where he now stood, they seemed to vanish, and the bird appeared utterly free, sitting in open space. "The cage, Your Majesty," Liang said softly, "was always in the mind of the observer. Step closer, change your view, and you see it was never there. You have a palace, not a prison. The only bars are those you perceive. I could not paint your freedom. I could only paint the key, the understanding that you are the one who decides what is a barrier and what is open sky." The emperor stared, moving his head again, watching the golden threads appear and disappear. For the first time in years, he felt a space open in his chest. The constraint had been his own viewpoint. In a drought-stricken village, there were 2 wells. The first was in the central square, deep and known to have sweet water, but it was arduous to draw from, requiring long, hard cranking of the pulley. The second was at the village edge, shallower with slightly brackish water, but it had a simple, easy bucket on a rope. Every day, villagers would crowd the first well, straining and arguing over turns, convinced that difficult water must be better. Only old man Hamza, too frail for the crowd, would go to the easy well. A traveler, parched, came to the village. Seeing the crowd at the deep well, he joined the line, growing thirstier by the minute. He saw Hamza returning from the edge of the village, carrying a full bucket, looking content. The traveler left the line and approached Hamza. "Is the water from the easy well good?" "It is wet," Hamza said with a shrug. "It quenches thirst." The traveler, desperate, went to the easy well. The water was slightly salty, but it was cool and immediate. It saved him. He returned to Hamza. "Why does everyone fight for the other well?" Hamza smiled. "They believe suffering adds value. That what comes hard must be pure, and what comes easy must be suspect. They are drinking an idea of water, not water itself. They would rather have a drop of perfect water tomorrow than a bucket of good enough water today. Do not confuse the struggle with the solution. Sometimes the answer is not in the deepest, hardest place, but in the simple, overlooked one that meets the need before you." The traveler understood. He had been moments from collapse, waiting for perfect water, while good water was steps away. He stayed in the village and helped Hamza build a second, easy pulley for the deep well. "Let the water be deep and accessible," Hamza said. "The value is in the drinking, not the dragging." A sculptor named Elias sought to carve the perfect statue of compassion. He labored over a magnificent block of white marble for years, chiseling every fold of the robe, every curl of the hair, but he could never get the face right. It looked stern, or sad, or vacant, never compassionate. One afternoon, frustrated, he threw down his tools. The setting sun streamed through his studio window at a low angle. As he sat in despair, the long shadow of his unfinished statue stretched across the floor. He watched it, and something magical happened. In the distorted, elongated shadow, the statue's face softened. The harsh lines of his carving blurred. The shadow looked gentle, forgiving, kind. Elias leapt up. He did not touch the statue itself. Instead, he began to adjust the objects in his studio, a vase here, a screen there, changing how the light fell. He worked not on the marble, but on the conditions around it. He angled a mirror to catch morning light. He hung a sheer cloth to diffuse the noon glare. Finally, at the golden hour, with light falling just so through a dusty window, he saw it. The statue's face, in that specific light, embodied pure compassion. It was an interaction between form and light, not the form alone. He invited the village. They did not see a perfect carving, they saw a face of profound kindness. "How did you do it?" they asked. I stopped trying to carve compassion into stone, Elias said. I realized compassion is not a fixed thing you can shape. It is a quality that appears under the right conditions. My work was not to create it, but to create the space, the light, where it could be seen. Perhaps we are all like this statue. Our true nature is not in the harsh, direct light of judgment, but seen truly in the kind, angled light of understanding. At the entrance to a peaceful valley stood a simple wooden gate. An old woman named Hannah was its keeper. Her sole duty was to ask one question of anyone who wished to enter: "What do you bring with you?" Travelers would arrive, weary from the road. The first, a merchant, patted his heavy money belt. "I bring my wealth and my prospects." Hannah shook her head gently. "You may not enter." The merchant was outraged. "Why? My wealth can benefit this valley." Hannah replied, "The valley has enough. Your burden of worry and calculation is what you truly carry. It will disturb our peace." Next came a soldier, clanking with armor. "I bring my strength and my sword to protect you." Hannah shook her head. "You may not enter." "Why not?" "I offer safety." "You bring fear," she said. "The belief that protection comes from a blade. Here, safety comes from trust. Your armor is a wall we do not need." A scholar arrived next, arms laden with scrolls. "I bring knowledge and great learning." Again, Hannah refused him. "You bring answers," she said. "We are a valley of questions. Your certainty would silence our wonder." Finally, a dusty, tired farmer approached, his hands empty. Hannah asked, "What do you bring with you?" The farmer looked at his empty hands, then at the setting sun. "I suppose I bring only my weariness from the journey, and my hope to see the morning light here." Hannah smiled and opened the gate wide. "You may enter. You bring only what is real for this moment, and an openness for the next. That is all the valley ever asks for." The gate was not to keep people out. It was to help them see what they were carrying that they could leave behind. The valley was not a place for perfect people. It was a place for honest ones, who traveled light enough to appreciate the stillness. As these final words drift through your mind, let the images soften and fade. The gate closes gently. The river of stories slows. The lantern's light dims to a soft glow. You have journeyed through tales of mended nets and leveled mines, of willow branches and painted cages, of deep wells and kind shadows. Each one a whisper, not a shout. A suggestion, not a command. The wisdom here is not owned by masters in distant huts, it lives in the quiet spaces of your own awareness. In your ability to notice when you are carrying a second, heavier sack. In your choice to see an unexpected thread not as a flaw, but as the beginning of a river. You are the boatman, and you are the passenger. You are the sculptor, and you are the light. As you drift now toward sleep, let go of any need to remember, to understand, to achieve. There is nothing to fix here, nowhere to go. The journey itself is home. Allow your breath to be the gentle ripple on the pond, settling back into stillness. Allow your body to feel supported, heavy, and at peace. The stories have done their work. They have brushed against your mind like willow branches, leaving only a sense of quiet resilience. From all of us here at Monk's Temple, we thank you for your presence. May the peace you have found here linger in the spaces between your thoughts. May you awaken not with answers, but with a refreshed curiosity for the gentle mystery of your own being. Sleep deeply. Rest completely. And when the morning light comes, may you greet it with the quiet, open heart of the traveler who has learned to see the cage as only threads of gold, visible from just one angle. In a small village known for its red clay, there lived a potter named Soren. He was famed for his perfectly symmetrical vases, each one a flawless twin to the last. He worked with intense concentration, his hands forcing the spinning clay into precise, uniform shapes. One morning, a tremor in the earth, a small quake, jostled his workshop. Soren's hands slipped on the wheel. The vase he was forming wobbled, then collapsed into an asymmetrical, lopsided form. He groaned, seeing hours of work ruined. He went to scrape the clay off the wheel to start over. But as he looked at the collapsed form, he paused. There was a gentle, organic beauty to it. It looked not like a manufactured object, but like a stone smoothed by a river, or a gourd grown in an uneven garden. On a whim, he decided to fire it anyway. When he pulled it from the kiln, the glaze had pooled in the unique valleys and curves, creating a pattern more vibrant and alive than any of his perfect vases. A passing poet saw it and offered to buy it for a small fortune. It has character, the poet said. It tells a story of resilience. Soren was stunned. He had spent his life eliminating wobbles, fighting imperfections. That day, he intentionally began to vary his pressure on the wheel. He allowed the clay to speak, to find its own balance. His later work became legendary, not for its perfection, but for its soul. Each piece was unique, bearing the gentle fingerprint of unpredictability. He told his apprentices, "For years, I thought my skill was in controlling the clay. My true skill was discovered when I learned to listen to it. The tremor did not ruin my work. It introduced my work to its own voice. Do not fear the wobble in your life, the unexpected shake. It might be the universe trying to show you a more beautiful shape." On a lonely, storm-battered coast, the lighthouse keeper, Finn, maintained a detailed log. Every night, he recorded the weather, gale-force winds, seas raging, visibility near zero. He noted the ships he saw struggling, the ones that made it, the ones that, he feared, did not. His log was a chronicle of danger and dread. One autumn, a new keeper, an old sailor named Arlen, came to share the duty. Finn showed him the grim log. Arlen nodded, but said nothing. The first storm of their watch was a terrible one. The wind screamed, and waves crashed against the cliffs like thunder. The next morning, Finn went to write in the log. He found Arlen had already made an entry. It did not mention the wind or waves. It read, "Last night, the beam cut through the darkness 1,243 times. Each rotation, a promise. No ships sighted. All safe in harbor, we trust." Finn was perplexed. "You didn't record the storm's fury." Arlen pointed out the window to the calm, glittering sea. The storm's fury is gone. It was temporary weather. But the light's promise, that is permanent. That is my duty to record. You were logging the shadow. I choose to log the light that holds it back. What you pay attention to grows in your mind. I choose to grow the assurance, not the fear. From that day, Finn's entries changed. He began to note the steadfastness of the beam, the clarity of the lens after he cleaned it, the peaceful hours between squalls. His heart, which had been clenched like a fist against the tempests, slowly began to open. He realized he hadn't been a keeper of a lighthouse, he had been a prisoner of the storms. Arlen had taught him the true job, to be a witness to the unwavering light. In a bustling town market, two merchants sold honey from neighboring stalls. Greta was shrewd. Her scale was always tipped slightly in her favor, and she would argue fiercely over the smallest weight. She amassed coins but was always tense, eyeing her competitors with suspicion. Her neighbor, Leo, had a different practice. His scale was perfectly true, but he often poured a little extra honey into the jar after the weight was measured. For the journey home, he'd say with a smile. He seemed to earn less, but he was always calm, humming as he worked. One harsh winter, a blight struck the local flowers. Honey became scarce. Greta, hoarding her stock, tripled her prices. People came, paid resentfully, and left without a word. Leo's stock was also low. He could not give his usual extra. Instead, he diluted his remaining honey with a little warm water and gentle herbs, creating a sweet elixir. He sold it at his old price. It's not pure honey, he explained openly, but it will bring sweetness to your tea in a dark season. The townspeople remembered his generosity. When spring returned and Greta's stall sat empty, her reputation sour, the townspeople brought Leo their business and their own garden surplus. His stall flourished. An elder watching this said, Greta measured honey. Leo measured humanity. A scale can weigh substance, but only the heart can weigh value. Greta's scale was always trying to take. Leo's scale, by always giving a little, measured the weight of trust. And in the lean season, trust is the only currency that never loses its worth. In a city of punctuality, a master clockmaker, Silas, built a magnificent public clock tower. Its chimes marked the hours with unerring precision, and the city ran by its dictate. Silas was proud of his creation that brought order to chaos. One day, a little girl, clutching a wilted dandelion, stood beneath the tower, crying. Silas approached. "Why do you cry, child? You'll be late." The girl sobbed, "The clock says playtime is over. But my flower hasn't finished its wish." Silas, a man of gears and pendulums, was struck silent. He looked from her tear-streaked face to the rigid face of his clock. He had built a master of measured time, but it knew nothing of dandelion time, of grief time, of wonder time. That night, he climbed his tower. He did not alter the great clock's mechanism. But he built a small, secondary dial, with no numbers. He painted on it simple images, a bud, a blooming flower, a setting sun, a rising moon. He called it, the heart season. It moved imperceptibly slowly, out of sync with the hourly chimes. He announced to the city that the new dial showed the time it takes for important things. People laughed at first. But the girl saw it. She would point and say, "It's almost blossom time," or "It's settling time." Slowly, others began to glance at it. A man hurrying to a meeting would see the dial at still water and take a breath. Parents would see it at nesting time and read one more story. The clock tower still chimed the hour of the day, but the small dial whispered the season of the soul. Silas told his apprentices, "I spent my life measuring seconds, thinking I was mastering time. I was only mapping its skeleton. The true essence of time, its breath, its spirit, is measured in moments of meaning, not in ticks of a gear." Never let the counting of time make you forget the making of it. Between two villages divided by a deep, narrow canyon, there was an old rope bridge. It was said the bridge had a peculiar trait: it echoed. A kind word spoken in its center would ripple back softer and sweeter. A harsh word would return amplified, distorted, and ugly. The villages were feuding. As people crossed, they would shout insults at those on the other side. The bridge would throw their anger back at them, magnified, deepening the bitterness. A young woman from the north side, Anya, had to cross to care for a sick aunt on the south side. She was fearful. As she stepped onto the planks, a youth from the south side stepped on from the opposite end. They met in the middle. He scowled, ready to snarl the usual taunts. Anya, heart pounding, did something unexpected. She bowed slightly and said, clear and simple, "I hope your family is well." The words left her lips. The bridge caught them. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a gentle, musical echo returned, wrapping around them, softly repeating, "Well, well, well." The youth's scowl faltered. He hadn't heard such a sound on that bridge in his lifetime. He found himself muttering, and yours." His gruff words were taken by the bridge and softened, returning as a warm murmur, "Yours, yours." They stood in the center, surrounded by these gentle echoes. No one had ever paused there to listen before. They crossed, each going their way, but the echo lingered in the canyon. The next day, the youth crossed again. Meeting a Northsider, he remembered the echo. He gave a cautious nod. A nod was not an insult, so the bridge returned no ugly noise. Slowly, tentative greetings replaced shouts. The bridge, which had been a drum for their discord, became a harp for their hesitant harmony. An elder from the south finally said, "We thought the bridge was cursed to mock us. It was only holding up a mirror, showing us the true sound of our own hearts. It didn't create the echo. It revealed it. Your voice always returns to you. Choose the sound you wish to hear again." In a monastery known for its exquisite rose garden, the head gardener, Brother Tomas, discovered a tragedy one morning. His prized, ancient white rose bush, the one that produced a single, perfect bloom each year, had wilted overnight. The bloom hung brown and lifeless, the leaves were spotted. Heartbroken, Tomas kneeled before it. His first instinct was to rip it out. It was diseased, a blight on his perfect garden. He fetched his spade. As he raised it, the abbot walked by. "What are you doing, Tomas?" "This rose is finished, abbot. It is ugly and sick. It must be removed before it spreads." The abbot knelt, touching a wilted petal gently. "How long has it given you a perfect bloom?" 22 years, Tomas whispered. "And for 22 days each year, you have found joy in it. For one day of sickness, you would destroy it and its 22 years of grace." The abbot instructed him not to remove it, but to tend to it separately. Tomas, with great reluctance, pruned the dead bloom, treated the soil, and watered the bush in isolation. He expected it to die. Weeks passed. Then, a small, green shoot appeared. Then another. By season's end, the bush was alive, though not flowering. The next spring, it did not produce one perfect bloom. It produced 7 smaller, slightly imperfect, but fiercely fragrant roses. Tomas showed the abbot, his eyes wet. "It is more beautiful now," he said. "The most beautiful gardens," the abbot said, "are not those without death or disease. They are those that include recovery. You wanted a monument to perfection, which is fragile. Now you have a testament to resilience, which is eternal. Do not be so quick to discard what seems broken. Its next chapter may be its most fragrant." In the royal court, there was a musician, Ilara, whose skill on the flute was said to make birds fall silent to listen. Yet, she was never satisfied, always practicing harder pieces, her brow furrowed in effort. One summer, the court traveled to a lakeside retreat. In the evenings, a humble fisherman would sit in his boat, not playing an instrument, but simply listening. He would tilt his head, a look of deep contentment on his face. Curious, Ilara approached him. "What music do you hear that brings you such peace?" "I hear only frogs and water." The fisherman smiled. "You are listening for music. I am listening to the world. The lap of water against the hull is the rhythm. The cry of the loon is the melody. The wind in the reeds is the harmony. The space between these sounds is the rest note that holds it all together. It is the world's symphony. My only task is to be quiet enough to attend the concert." That night, Ilara sat by the lake, her flute beside her. She closed her eyes and did what she had not done in years. She stopped trying to make music, and simply allowed herself to receive it. She heard the intricate layers the fisherman described. For the first time, she felt full, without playing a single note. Returning to court, her playing transformed. The striving was gone. Between the notes she played, there was now a profound silence, a listening quality that made her music breathe. The court said she played with the soul of the lake inside her. She told the king, "I was a musician when I filled the air with my sound. I became an artist when I learned to first fill myself with the sound of the world." The most important part of any song is the silence that makes it possible. On opposite slopes of the same green valley lived 2 shepherds. Alden, on the west slope, was vigilant and anxious. He counted his sheep incessantly, built high fences, and stayed awake nights fearing wolves. His flock was always contained, but the sheep were skittish and thin, huddled together. Corin, on the east slope, took a different approach. He built only a low, symbolic fence. He knew the terrain, where the sweetest grass grew, where the stream ran cool, where the rocks provided shelter. He would lead his sheep to these places, then sit under a tree, playing a simple reed flute. His flock spread out, grazing contentedly, and always returned to the sound of his flute at dusk. They were robust and calm. A terrible storm hit the valley. Flash floods rose. Alden's high fence became a trap, channeling water into his pasture. In his panic to herd his sheep to higher ground against the current, many were scattered and lost. On the east slope, the water spread widely across the open pasture, shallow and less forceful. Corin, calm, played a specific, steady tune on his flute, the coming home melody. His sheep, familiar and trusting, turned from their grazing and followed the sound through the familiar paths he had always used, winding safely to high ground. He did not lose a single one. After the storm, Alden, grieving his lost sheep, came to Corin. "How did you keep them all? You have no real fence." Corin offered him a seat. "A fence holds sheep in," he said. "But trust calls them home. You built barriers against what you feared. I built relationships based on knowing what they needed. Fear is a rigid master, it creates brittle solutions. Understanding is a gentle guide, it creates flexible paths. You tried to control the flock. I simply learned the melody they would follow." In a quiet study, a scholar named Linus toiled late into the night, his oil lamp burning brightly. A moth, drawn from the darkness, began its frantic dance around the flame. It circled closer and closer, beating itself against the hot glass, falling to the desk, only to rise and try again. Linus, annoyed, tried to shoo it away. It always returned. Finally, he put a glass shade over the lamp. The moth, confused, battered itself against the shade instead. Exasperated, Linus caught the moth gently in his hands and carried it to the open window. He released it into the moonlit night. For a moment, the moth did not fly away. It rested on the windowsill. Then, it turned not toward the distant moon, but toward the soft, silver light of a spider's web glistening in the courtyard below. It flew toward that gentler glow and settled peacefully nearby. Linus returned to his desk, but his mind was on the moth. He had assumed it wanted his brilliant, consuming lamplight. But perhaps it was only seeking light, any light, and had mistaken intensity for purity. His own lamp, under its glass shade, now seemed harsh and isolated. He turned it down to a soft glow, just enough to see his page. He opened the window wider, allowing the moonlight to stream in and mix with the lamplight. The room felt softer, larger, connected to the night. He wrote in his journal, "How often do we, like the moth, confuse the brightest, hottest light for the true one? We exhaust ourselves seeking brilliance, when a gentler glow, of understanding, of peace, of shared moonlight, was what we needed all along." And sometimes, the kindest act is not to provide the brightest flame, but to open the window and show the wider, softer sky. A large, jagged stone sat in the middle of a fast-moving stream. For years, it raged against the current. "You wear me down," it cried to the water. You are relentless and cold. It resisted every drop, and in its resistance, it remained sharp, angular, and unhappy. A few feet downstream lay another stone, similar in size but smooth and oval. The water flowed around it with a gentle, murmuring sound. The jagged stone called out, "How can you stand it? Don't you feel attacked?" The smooth stone replied, "I do not stand against the water. I rest within it. The current is not my enemy. It is my sculptor." The jagged stone scoffed. "It is breaking you apart." "Look closely," said the smooth stone. "I am not smaller. I am simply no longer fighting. The water has not taken my substance. It has only softened my edges. My core is unchanged, but now I do not cut. I simply am." A great flood came. The raging water tore the jagged stone from its place, tumbling it violently downstream, where it cracked against other rocks. The smooth stone, offering no resistance, was gently lifted, carried a short way, and settled into a new, peaceful eddy. When the waters receded, the jagged stone, now broken in two, lay sore and battered. The smooth stone sat, whole and serene, in a sunlit pool. A child picked it up, marveling at its perfect smoothness, and placed it in her garden. The lesson whispered by the stream was this: resistance creates friction, and friction creates wear, fracture, and pain. Acceptance allows movement, transformation, and, ultimately, a peaceful place to rest. You cannot stop the flow of life. You can only choose whether to be worn down by it, or smoothed by it. A learned professor traveled far to meet a hermit sage renowned for his wisdom. After a difficult journey, he found the sage sitting before a small fire, preparing tea. Eager to impress, the professor immediately launched into a monologue about his studies, his theories, and the great philosophical questions he sought to answer. The sage listened silently, nodding occasionally. He then picked up a teapot and began to pour tea into the professor's cup. He poured and poured. The cup filled, then overflowed, spilling hot tea onto the professor's lap. The professor leapt back. "Stop! The cup is full. It can't take any more." The sage set the pot down. "Exactly," he said calmly. "How can I share this tea with you, or how can any new understanding reach you, when your cup is already so full? You came here to receive, but you brought only what you wished to give. To learn, you must first create space." Chastened, the professor emptied his cup onto the ground. He sat back down, silent. This time, the sage poured slowly. The professor received the tea, warm and fragrant. He drank it in the quiet, without speaking. The wisdom was not in the words that followed, it was in the act of making room. He had traveled thousands of miles to be taught, but the first and greatest lesson was to become empty enough to be taught. Every year, the village held a lantern festival. People would write their worries, regrets, or fears on small pieces of rice paper, place them inside a paper lantern, and release it into the night sky, symbolically letting it go. A young woman, Mara, whose heart was heavy with a recent loss, found she could not write. Her sorrow felt too vast, too deep for a tiny slip of paper. She sat apart, watching the hundreds of lanterns float upward, a constellation of released burdens drifting away. An old woman, the keeper of the lanterns, sat beside her. "Your burden won't fit on the paper," she asked gently. Mara shook her head, tears finally falling. "It's too big." "Then don't write it down," the old woman said. "Give it to the fire itself." She led Mara to the central brazier where the lanterns were lit. "The paper is just a symbol. The true letting go happens here, in the heart, in the moment you choose to transform the weight into light. Watch." The old woman took an empty lantern and held it over the flames without a message inside. It filled with hot air and began to tug at her fingers. "This one carries only the intention to release. Sometimes, you don't need the details. You just need to light the candle and open your hands." Mara, with a deep breath, took a lantern. She didn't write. She simply held it over the flame, and in her mind, she whispered, "I release the weight of this grief." She let it go. It rose, a bright, empty vessel of pure light, joining the others. She felt no magical cure. But she felt a slight loosening, as if she had set down a heavy bag she'd forgotten she was carrying. The old woman nodded. "You don't have to name every stone in the burden. You just have to decide you're tired of carrying it. The fire understands. The night understands." The weaving of the day in a high mountain village, there lived a woman named Ilara who was known for her beautiful tapestries. Each morning, she would sit at her loom with a basket of threads beside her. Vibrant blues and golds from joyful moments, deep reds of effort, soft grays of quiet reflection, and even some dark threads from moments of sadness or frustration. Her granddaughter watched her one day. "Grandmother, why do you use the dark threads? They make the picture less pretty." Ilara smiled. "Watch." She wove a section using only bright gold. It was dazzling, but flat. It had no depth, no contrast. Then, she wove a new section, integrating a single, thin, dark thread among the gold. Suddenly, the gold seemed to glow brighter. The tapestry gained dimension and richness. The dark thread, Ilara explained, does not ruin the gold. It defines it. It gives it meaning. A day woven only of ease would be like a sky with no night. You would never see the stars, and you would grow weary of the sun. The difficult moments, the quiet ones, the struggles, they are not mistakes in the pattern. They are what give the joyful moments their shape and their shine. Do not wish for a life of only one color. Learn to weave with all the threads you are given. The finished work will be stronger, more interesting, and truly yours. At the end of each day, Ilara would look at her loom, seeing not a finished tapestry, but the progress of a living one. She saw how the dark thread of the morning's worry had been crossed by the golden thread of an afternoon's laughter, creating a new, unexpected pattern. The work was never ruined, it was simply continuing. Now, let the loom of your mind grow still. Let the images fade, the stories complete their telling. There is no more to weave tonight. Feel the gentle descent of your awareness, like the final lantern disappearing into the vast, starry sky. The lessons were not commands to follow, but landscapes to visit, places within your own spirit where peace already resides, where resilience quietly grows, where acceptance smooths the sharp edges of the day. You have traveled with shepherds and fishers, potters and weavers. You have sat by streams and in silent studies. You have seen that light can be a beam or a glow, that a fence is not as strong as trust, and that even the darkest thread has its place in the whole. Carry nothing from this place but the feeling of ease. The stories will dissolve, as dreams do. What remains is the soft ground of your own being, ready for rest. Your breath is your own gentle rhythm now. The voice that guided this journey grows quiet, leaving you in the benevolent silence of your own heart. From all of us at Monk's Temple, we wish you a night of profound and healing rest. May you awaken feeling refreshed, lighter, and curiously open to the subtle, beautiful patterns of your own unfolding day. In a coastal village, the fishermen always set their nets at dawn. Young Kaito, eager to prove himself, would cast his net with great force, far from the others, certain he would find a richer catch in solitude. Yet, day after day, he returned with little. His net often tangled, or he'd find only small fish. An elder fisherman, Hiro, watched him from the shore. One evening, as Kaito mended his empty net with frustration, Hiro approached. "You cast for fish," Hiro said, "but the ocean does not give its bounty to force. It gives to harmony." The next morning, Hiro invited Kaito to join his boat. Instead of casting far out, Hiro guided their boat to a place where the currents met. He did not simply throw the net. He watched the water's surface, the flight of birds, the subtle shifts of light. He then cast the net in a wide, gentle arc, letting it sink slowly like a falling leaf. When they pulled it up, it was teeming with fish. Kaito was amazed. "How did you know?" "The fish are not isolated," Hiro explained. "They move with the tide, follow the smaller life, seek specific temperatures. I was not casting a net into empty water. I was placing it within a living system. You were fighting the sea. I was cooperating with it. Your effort was visible, the splash, the strain. The true net that catches abundance is unseen, it is woven from patience, observation, and respect for the patterns larger than yourself." From that day, Kaito learned to read the language of the sea. Not just its surface, but its whispers. His catches grew, not from greater effort, but from deeper connection. He understood that success often lies not in striving against the current, but in understanding where to gently place your intent within the flow of things. High on a windswept cliff grew a wild pine, gnarled and majestic, shaped by decades of storm and sun. In a sheltered courtyard below, a master gardener tended a bonsai pine, a miniature masterpiece, every branch carefully pruned and wired into a vision of perfect, contained beauty. The gardener's apprentice once asked, "Master, which tree is more perfect? The wild one, free and strong, or our bonsai, shaped by wisdom?" The gardener did not answer. He took the apprentice to the cliff. "Speak to the wind," he said. The apprentice stood before the wild pine, feeling the power of the elements that shaped it. They then returned to the courtyard. "Now," said the gardener, "speak to the patients." The apprentice sat before the bonsai, observing the decades of loving attention in its form. "The wild pine expresses the perfection of acceptance," the gardener finally said. "It became what the universe asked of it, without resistance. The bonsai expresses the perfection of intention. It became what a caring heart imagined for it, with gentle guidance. One is not better. They are two different dialogues with existence." He pointed to the apprentice's own chest. "Within you grows both trees. The wild part that adapts and survives life's storms. And the shaped part that cultivates discipline, artistry, and peace. Do not praise one and deny the other. A life lived well is a garden that contains both the cliff and the courtyard." In a monastery where chanting was central to prayer, a young monk named Leo had a voice that was ordinary. It cracked on the high notes, and sometimes fell flat. He loved the chant, but sang softly, ashamed. The choirmaster, Brother Matthias, had a voice like honeyed stone, deep and true. One day, he called Leo to him. "From tomorrow," he said, "you will stand beside me and lead the midday chant." Leo was terrified. "But my voice is broken, brother. It will spoil the prayer." Matthias placed a hand on his shoulder. "You misunderstand the purpose of the chant. It is not a performance for an audience. It is an offering. And an offering is measured by the sincerity of the giver, not the perfection of the gift. Your earnest, fragile voice may do more to open hearts than my flawless one ever could. A perfect note touches the ear. A struggling note, offered with devotion, touches the soul." The next day, Leo stood beside the choirmaster. His voice wavered, it broke, but he poured his whole heart into the ancient words. As they sang, something shifted in the chapel. Others, who had been chanting mechanically, began to sing with more feeling. The prayer seemed to deepen, to become more human, more tender. Afterward, an older monk came to Leo, eyes damp. "Thank you," he whispered. "For years, I have been afraid to sing because I am not good. Hearing you gave me courage. Your broken melody was the key that unlocked my own voice." Leo realized that by hiding his imperfection, he had been withholding a gift. Sometimes, our presumed flaws are not barriers to connection, they are the very bridges. In a town of busy craftsmen, there was a narrow, unused alley between two workshops. Over the years, each workshop had piled debris there, broken tools, scraps, forgotten things. It became an eyesore, a dark place everyone avoided. The potter, whose door opened near one end, grumbled about the clutter but did nothing. The weaver, whose window overlooked the alley, simply drew her curtain. One day, a traveling artist arrived. She saw not an alley, but a long, blank canvas. She asked the town council for permission to clean it and create a mural. Skeptical, they agreed. For weeks, she worked alone, hauling away rubbish, washing the walls. Then, with vibrant paints, she began to transform the space. On one wall, she painted a lush forest. On the opposite wall, a calm, reflective lake, so real you could almost feel its coolness. At the end, where the alley met the light, she painted an arched gateway leading to a sunlit meadow. When she finished, the town gathered. The dark, forbidding alley was gone. In its place was a breathtaking passage of beauty. Townspeople began to walk through it just to feel its peace. The potter placed a bench near his door to enjoy the forest wall. The weaver opened her curtain, and a painted lake light reflected into her room. The elder of the town addressed everyone. We all saw a door that was locked, a problem with no solution, so we looked away. The artist saw that the door was not locked. It was merely a wall we had built ourselves, from neglect and assumption. She did not open a door that existed. She showed us that we could paint a new one. Never accept that a passage in your life is forever closed. Sometimes, the way forward isn't found by unlocking, but by creating. Two neighbors were known for their beautiful gardens. Mr. Alden's garden was a spectacle of vibrant, exotic flowers. He used special fertilizers, played classical music from hidden speakers, and would give tours, explaining each rare hybrid. His garden was impressive, but visitors often left feeling slightly overwhelmed. Ms. Beach's garden next door was different. It was a tangle of native wildflowers, herbs, and old-fashioned roses. She spent hours there, not tending with urgency, but quietly weeding, humming, observing bees. Her garden was not orderly, but it felt alive, buzzing, and fragrant. The town was to give a Garden of the Year award. Most assumed Mr. Alden would win for his clear effort and spectacle. The judge, an elderly horticulturist, visited both. In Mr. Alden's garden, she admired the specimens, nodding politely. In Ms. Beach's garden, she sat on a weathered bench for a long time, closing her eyes, listening. She awarded the prize to Miss Beach. Mr. Alden was shocked. "But my flowers are superior." The judge replied gently, "Your garden is a museum of flowers, meticulously curated. It speaks of your skill. Her garden is a conversation with life. It speaks of belonging. A great garden is not measured by the rarity of its plants, but by the peace it cultivates in those who enter. Your garden shouts its beauty. Hers whispers, and in the whisper, one can hear the earth itself. The loudest contest is not always won by the loudest voice. A revered sculptor was visited by a prince who demanded a statue for his palace. "Carve me a dragon," said the prince, "so fearsome and real that it terrifies all who see it." The sculptor agreed. He selected a massive, flawless block of jade. For a year, the prince sent messengers, asking for progress. Each time, the sculptor said, "I am studying the stone." 2 years passed. The prince grew furious. He traveled to the sculptor's studio, ready to punish him for his delay. He found the jade block exactly as it had been, uncarved, pristine. "You have done nothing," the prince roared. The sculptor bowed calmly. "Your Highness, I have done everything. I have studied this stone for 2 years. I have learned its veins, its spirit, its hidden light. And I have found that within it sleeps not a dragon, but a sleeping child, peaceful and full of potential. To carve a dragon from it would be an act of violence against its true nature. I could give you your fear, or I could offer you the truth of the stone. I choose the truth. He placed his hand on the cool jade. The greatest artistry is not forcing a form upon the world, but revealing the form that already waits within. This block's gift is not terror, but peace. Will you accept it? The prince, humbled and silent, stared at the stone. For the first time, he saw not raw material for his ego, but a thing of quiet beauty with its own purpose. He left the block uncarved, placing it in his private garden as a reminder that true power lies not in imposing our will, but in perceiving what is truly there. In a small hermitage, an old monk's only companion was an iron kettle, blackened by decades of fire. Every morning, he would place it on the flame to heat water for tea. As it heated, the kettle would begin to sing, a low, rising hum that turned into a gentle whistle. A visiting student, seeking profound teachings, grew impatient with this simple ritual. "Master," he said one day, "instead of listening to a kettle, could you not teach me the secret of enlightenment?" The monk smiled. "The kettle is teaching you now. Listen." Annoyed, the student listened. He heard only a pot of water getting hot. "I hear nothing special." "Ah," said the monk. "You hear nothing special. But tell me, is the sound the same when the water is cold?" "No." "Is it the same when the flame is too high?" "It shrieks." "Is it the same when the water is nearly boiled?" "It settles into a steady song." The kettle's sound is born from the relationship between water, fire, iron, and air. It is the voice of perfect conditions meeting. He poured the hot water over tea leaves. Enlightenment is not a secret hidden in a book. It is the song that arises when your elements are in harmony, when your body, mind, spirit, and circumstances are in right relationship. The kettle does not try to sing. It simply fulfills its nature under the right conditions, and singing happens. Your work is not to seek a magical note, but to arrange your life so that your own true song can emerge. Start by listening to the kettles in your world. They are all singing the same lesson. The student sat with his tea, hearing for the first time the music of the ordinary. The lesson was not in the whistle, but in the listening. In a village nestled in a valley that saw little winter sun, there was a tradition. Each household kept a lamp lit in the window through the long, dark months. It was a symbol of warmth, a promise to travelers, and a quiet defiance against the gloom. In one home, an elderly woman named Flora kept her lamp meticulously. She polished the glass each morning, measured the oil precisely, and trimmed the wick to an exact length. Her lamp burned with a clear, steady, and unchanging flame. It was reliable, but somehow cold in its perfection. Next door, a young father named Elias kept a lamp for his family. His was often smudged by little fingers. The oil level rose and fell. Sometimes the flame danced wildly when a draft snuck in, sometimes it guttered low, almost going out before he tended it. Its light was unpredictable, alive. One fierce winter night, a blizzard descended. Flora, checking her perfect flame, saw a figure struggling through the snow outside. A lost traveler. She held her lamp higher to the window. Its steady light was visible, but it cast a narrow, rigid beam that did little to cut the swirling white. Elias, seeing the same traveler, rushed to his window. His lamp, caught in a draft, flickered and waved. The dancing light threw shifting, broader patterns onto the snow, creating a moving beacon that the traveler could follow through the confusion. The traveler stumbled toward the dancing light and found safety. The next day, the traveler thanked both households. To Flora he said, "Your light was constant, a point on the map." To Elias he said, "Your light was alive, it reached out and found me." The village elder, hearing of it, said, "We need both lights. The steady flame reminds us of our enduring spirit. The dancing flame reminds us of our adaptable heart. Do not judge one as better. Sometimes, survival is found not in perfect consistency, but in responsive, even messy, vitality. Your spirit may feel flickering and unsteady at times. That does not mean it is failing. It may simply be reaching out in the only way it can through the storm. A renowned painter was commissioned to create a mural for the king's new hall. He worked for months, covering the vast wall with intricate scenes of battles, festivals, and landscapes. It was dazzling in its detail, leaving not an inch blank. The court applauded its complexity. Yet, the king felt uneasy in the hall. The mural was overwhelming, the eyes had nowhere to rest. It felt crowded, noisy. A humble monk, visiting the palace, was asked his opinion. He gazed at the wall for a long time. He then bowed to the king and said, "Your Majesty, the art is magnificent. But it speaks only of doing, of filling. It does not speak of being, of allowing." Intrigued, the king asked the painter to create a second mural in a smaller, private chamber, guided by the monk. The painter, humbled, agreed. This time, the monk instructed differently. "Paint a single, graceful branch of cherry blossom in one corner," he said. "Then, let the rest be the color of the wall, a soft, warm white. Paint nothing else." The painter was aghast. "But it will be empty. It will look unfinished." "Trust," said the monk. Reluctantly, the painter did so. The result was a vast expanse of peaceful color, with one exquisite, delicate branch gracing its space. The king entered the chamber and immediately sighed, his shoulders relaxing. He sat for an hour in silence. "This," he said, "is peace." The other mural shouted. "This one listens." The monk nodded. The first mural represented the mind full of thoughts, achievements, memories. It is impressive, but exhausting. This mural represents the mind in meditation. The branch is the single, gentle thought. The vast space is awareness itself, which holds everything yet remains undisturbed. Never underestimate the power of the unfilled space. It is not emptiness. It is the ground of peace from which all beauty arises. For generations, two families farmed adjacent land, divided by a low stone wall. The origin of the wall was forgotten, but the bitterness remained. They did not speak. If a tool was found on the wrong side, it was kept. If a tree branch grew over, it was hacked off. One summer, a drought parched both farms. The family on the higher land had a spring that slowed to a trickle. The family on the lower land had a well that grew muddy and scarce. Each family suffered in stubborn silence, watching their crops wither. The young daughter from the lower farm, seeing her father's despair, took her small bucket and did something unthinkable. She climbed over the wall. She walked to the higher farm's nearly dry spring, filled her bucket with the precious little water there, and carried it back. She did not water her plants. She poured it at the base of the old apple tree whose roots, she knew from a forgotten time, sprawled under the wall into both properties. Her father saw her and was furious. But before he could speak, the elder from the higher farm appeared at the wall. He had seen her act. He was not angry. Tears were in his eyes. The next day, the elder and his sons arrived at the wall with picks. The lower family watched, tense. But the men did not attack. They began to carefully take the wall apart, stone by stone. They worked until they reached the damp earth below where the girl had poured the water, a spot where the spring's underground vein likely ran. "The wall is not saving our water," the elder said to the stunned neighbor. "It is stopping it from finding its way. The land was never two pieces. We made it so." Together, they dug a shallow channel from the spring site toward the lower field. Water, freed from the barrier of stones, began to seep along the new path. It was not much, but it was shared. The wall was never rebuilt. In its place, they planted a row of olive trees, whose roots would bind the soil and whose fruit would belong to both. The wall had been a monument to separation. Its absence became the foundation of a bridge, built not of stone, but of a child's compassion and the land's forgotten unity. In a temple known for its discipline, the morning bell was rung with rigorous precision at exactly 5 a.m. The monk assigned, Brother Ben, took pride in his powerful, timely strike. The sound was a command to wake, to begin. One winter, Brother Ben fell ill. The task fell to old Brother Anselm, who was nearly deaf. The community braced for a lapse in their routine. At 5 a.m., no sound came. Monks stirred, confused. Then, at 5:05, they heard it. Not a strike, but the soft, resonant ping of the bell being touched by the clapper, not struck. Then another gentle ping, and another, each tone lingering, blending, creating a soft, waking melody that seemed to draw the silence into the sound, rather than shatter it. The monks found Anselm standing at the bell, his eyes closed, his hand on the rope, feeling the vibration through his bones, listening with his body. He was not measuring time. He was conversing with the metal, drawing out its voice with patience. When he finished, the silence that followed was not an absence, but a presence, a velvety quiet that felt invited, not imposed. Afterward, the abbot was asked if he would correct the old monk. The abbot shook his head. Brother Ben rang the time. Brother Anselm rang the moment. One tells us what to do. The other shows us how to be. We have been awakened by a command for years. Today, we were invited to wakefulness by a kindness. Perhaps the Spirit needs more invitations and fewer commands. From then on, the first bell of the day was rung the Anselm way, a gentle calling forth. And the monastery began its days not in abrupt duty, but in gradual, grateful presence. In the town square stood a magnificent marble statue of a hero, gleaming in the sun. A lonely beggar often sat at its base, in the statue's long afternoon shadow. The townspeople would admire the statue and ignore the man in the shadow. One day, a wise teacher passed through. She made a point of sitting beside the beggar in the shade. "Tell me," she asked the town leader, "which is more important to your square, the statue or the shadow?" The leader chuckled. "The statue, of course. It is art, history, pride. The shadow is nothing, just an absence of light." The teacher asked for a canvas and paint. That evening, with the setting sun casting the longest shadow, she painted not the statue, but its shadow stretching across the cobblestones. And within the shape of the shadow, she painted the beggar, not as a dark figure, but illuminated with intricate detail and dignity, as if the shadow itself was his spotlight. She hung the painting in the square. People gathered, astonished. They had seen the statue every day but had never truly seen the shadow, nor the man it sheltered. The painting revealed that the shadow was not nothing, it was a shape created by the light, and within it lived a human story. The leader, humbled, understood. "We honor the object that catches the light," he said, "but we forget to honor the space shaped by it, the space that gives refuge, that offers contrast, that contains the unseen." Our town's greatness is not just in its heroes cast in marble, but in how it treats those resting in their shadow. The town built a small, beautiful shelter for the beggar, not hidden, but integrated, so that the statue's shadow would fall upon a place of honor. The teacher's lesson was clear: do not confuse what is brightly lit with what is valuable. True compassion often sees most clearly in the shade. In the court of a music-loving king, the royal composer labored for a decade on his masterpiece, a symphony meant to capture the entirety of the human experience. He filled it with triumphant marches, mournful adagios, and frantic scherzos. On the day of the premiere, the grand hall was packed. The performance began. The music was technically breathtaking, emotionally wrenching, and immensely complex. It demanded everything of the listeners. As it moved toward its final movement, the composer had written a series of crashing, resolving chords to leave the audience in awe. But as the orchestra reached this climax, the first violinist, an old man who had felt the music deeply, did something unforeseen. Instead of playing the final, decisive note with force, he let his bow hover. He played the note so softly it was barely a whisper, then let it fade into silence, leaving the last chord incomplete, hanging in the air. The conductor froze. The orchestra stopped. The audience sat in stunned silence. The symphony was unfinished. The composer was mortified. His life's work, ruined. But in the silence that followed, a silence that was now part of the music, something happened. The unresolved chord did not feel like a mistake. It felt like a question. It felt like an open window. It felt, strangely, more true to life than any perfect ending could have. The old violinist set down his instrument. He addressed the king, his voice clear in the quiet hall. "Your Majesty, life does not end with a crashing chord. It ends with a breath, a whisper, an open space. To force a perfect ending is to pretend we understand the mystery. I offer instead an honest one." The king, who had expected to be impressed, found himself deeply moved. He stood. The masterpiece was not in the notes played, he declared, but in the courage to leave room for the unplayed. This silence is the most profound note of all. Our lives, too, are unfinished symphonies. Their beauty often lies not in the conclusive ending, but in the open, tender space we leave for what comes next, even if we cannot hear it. The symphony was forever performed that way, ending not with a period, but with a comma, a testament to the humility of not having the last word. Two fishing boats shared the same harbor. Captain Reese had a massive, heavy iron anchor. He trusted it completely. In any storm, he would throw it overboard with a satisfying splash, confident his boat would not budge. Captain Celine had a different anchor, a cluster of smaller, carefully woven ropes with hooks that gripped the seabed in multiple places. It was lighter, more flexible. A great storm descended upon the harbor. Reese dropped his mighty anchor. Celine deployed her woven one. The storm raged. Reese's anchor held fast, too fast. The waves lifted his boat violently, but the anchor refused to give an inch. The strain was tremendous, and with a sickening crack, his mooring line snapped. His boat, suddenly free, was dashed against the rocks. Celine's boat also strained. But her woven anchor had give. It shifted slightly, allowing the boat to ride the waves with a little movement, absorbing the shock. It held through flexibility, not rigidity. Her boat survived. In the calm morning, Celine helped salvage what she could of Reese's boat. "I thought my strength was in not moving," Reese said, devastated. "Strength is not in never yielding," Celine replied gently. "It is in knowing how to yield without breaking. My anchor holds because it can dance with the current, not fight it. Your anchor was a fist. Mine is a hand, open enough to grip, but supple enough to feel the shape of the storm." In life, we need holds that are secure, but not so rigid they snap us when the wind changes direction. In a forgotten corner of a vast city, there was a small, peculiar library. It did not lend books. It lent lost things. A single, unmatched glove. A key with no lock. A faded postcard addressed to "Dearest." A child's first tooth. People who found such items could bring them here. People missing such items could come to look. The keeper was an elderly woman named Elara. She would listen to the story of each found object, then place it carefully on a shelf with a small tag describing where it was found and the feeling of the finder. One day, a man entered, looking haggard. He wasn't missing a thing. He said, "I am lost. Do you have a shelf for that?" Ilara smiled. "Follow me." She led him not to a shelf, but to a reading nook by a window. "Sit," she said. "Now, tell me the story of where you were found." "Found?" the man asked. "I don't understand." "Every lost person," Ilara explained, "is also a found object, waiting for the right story. Someone found you as a child and called you son. A teacher found you and called you student. A friend found you and called you companion. You are not a story of loss. You are a collection of the places and people who have found you valuable. Look around. Every object here is waiting to complete a story for someone. You are no different. Your value isn't diminished because you feel adrift. It simply means your next chapter is waiting to be found." The man sat by the window, surrounded by the quiet history of misplaced things. For the first time, his loneliness felt not like an emptiness, but like a space with potential. He was not a lost thing. He was a story temporarily between chapters, sitting on life's shelf, awaiting the next person who would find him meaningful. A vain young prince had a mirror made of the clearest silver, in which he would admire himself daily. He believed it showed the complete truth of his beauty and stature. One day, an advisor led him to a high mountain lake, its surface still as glass. "Look into this mirror, Your Highness," the advisor said. The prince peered in. He saw his reflection, but it was different. It was smaller, set against immense mountains and vast sky. He saw clouds passing over his face. A fish rippled the water, gently distorting his image. An eagle flew overhead, its shadow crossing his. He stepped back, troubled. This mirror is imperfect. It changes, it includes other things. It does not show me as I truly am. "Exactly, Your Highness," said the advisor. "Your silver mirror shows you isolated, frozen, separate from the world. It shows a lie of independence. This lake mirror shows the truth, that you are a small, changing part of a living, breathing whole. Your true reflection is not a static portrait. It is a fleeting, interconnected moment in a vast and beautiful system. To see yourself truly, you must see yourself in context, humbled by the mountains, animated by the wind, connected by the ripple. The clearest mirror is the one that shows you not alone, but belonging." The prince returned to his palace and had his silver mirror melted down. From it, he made a simple bowl, which he kept filled with water from the mountain lake, a reminder that his truest self was reflected not in isolation, but in relationship to the world around him. For 40 years, old man Henry kept a pristine garden. His defining act was weeding. He would spend hours on his knees, meticulously removing anything he had not planted himself. His borders were sharp, his rows clean. As he grew older, the task became painful. One spring, his back gave out. He could no longer weed. He watched in despair as volunteers appeared, dandelions, clover, wild violets, even a small maple seedling. To him, it was chaos. It was failure. By midsummer, however, his garden looked different, not ruined. The clover fixed nitrogen in the soil. The dandelions brought up nutrients from deep below. The violets provided ground cover, holding moisture. Bees and butterflies flocked to the new flowers in numbers he'd never seen. The birds came for the seeds. His vegetables, nestled among this lively community, grew more vigorously than ever before. A young neighbor, seeing his distress turn to wonder, asked, "What changed your mind about the weeds?" Henry sighed, a sigh of release. "I thought I was the creator of the garden. I was merely its traffic director, trying to enforce my own narrow rules. The garden knew how to garden itself better than I did. I was fighting a partnership, calling it a war. The weeds were not invaders. They were helpers wearing different uniforms. I spent a lifetime removing the very things that wanted to make my garden strong." He never weeded again. His garden became a lush, slightly wild tapestry of cultivated and wild plants, all thriving together. He learned that control is not the same as care, and that an ecosystem is wiser than an agenda. In the tower of a village that had grown obsessed with schedules and productivity, the old clock broke. Instead of repairing it with new hands, a curious decision was made. The clock face was cleaned, but left blank, a simple white circle with no numbers, no hour or minute hands. At first, the villagers were disoriented. They missed the constant ticking, the visual command of the time. They felt adrift. But slowly, something shifted. Meetings began when everyone had gathered, not when the clock dictated. Workers rested when tired, not when a bell rang. Children played until the light faded, not until a predetermined hour. People began to notice the subtler clocks, the position of the sun, the lengthening of shadows, the hunger in their bellies, the fatigue in their bones. They lived by rhythm, not by rule. An elder commented one evening as people gathered spontaneously to watch the sunset, "The old clock told us what time it was for the machine of the day. This empty clock asks us what time it is for our own lives. It tells us the time is always now, and the question is not, what hour is it? But, what is this hour for?" We traded efficiency for presence, and I believe we have gained more than we lost. The clock remained handless. It wasn't a broken timepiece, it became a monument to time itself, not as something to be measured and spent, but as something to be inhabited and felt. In a simple hermitage at the edge of a great forest, a single candle burned each night on the windowsill. The hermit who lived there was long gone, but a villager had taken up the quiet task of lighting it at dusk, a tradition whose origin was forgotten. One particularly dark and stormy night, a traveler, lost and cold, stumbled through the woods. Despair was closing in when he saw, through the sheeting rain, one tiny, unwavering point of light. He followed it, desperate, and found the hermitage. The candle, protected by the deep sill, burned steadily. It led him to shelter, to dry wood by the hearth, to safety. The next morning, the villager came to light the candle as usual and found the traveler asleep by the warm ashes. After hearing his story, the villager said, "I'm glad our little light helped. But it's just one candle. It's not much." The traveler shook his head. You are wrong. In the absolute blackness of that storm, it was not just a candle. It was the only star that hadn't been clouded over. It was a sun. It was the entire constellation of hope. Do not measure your light by its size in the daytime. Measure it by its power in the darkness where it is needed. This single flame was enough to rewrite my story from one of end to one of beginning. From that day, the villager understood the true weight of the tradition. It was not a meaningless ritual. It was an act of faith, a promise that even the smallest, most consistent light holds a universe of potential guidance for someone lost in their personal night. He began to light the candle not out of habit, but with a prayer, "May this small flame be a sun for whoever needs it." And now, the candle we leave burning in the window of your mind. A small, steady point of light in the gathering quiet. Feel the stories settling like gentle snow, covering the busy pathways of the day with a blanket of soft understanding. There is no need to remember them. Their work is done. They have softened the ground of your thoughts, making it ready for rest. Notice the silence that has been growing between the words. That silence is not empty. It is the unfilled space where peace lives. It is the lake mirror reflecting your true, connected self. It is the handless clock, telling you the time is simply now. You have traveled far in stillness. You have seen anchors that hold through flexibility, and gardens that thrive through allowance. You have been the lost thing in the library, and you have been the finder. You have heard the symphony that ends with an open question, and found it more beautiful for its honesty. Let all of it go. Release the images, the lessons, the metaphors. They have served their purpose. What remains is you. Breathing, resting, being. Your body is heavy and supported. Your mind is quieting, like water after the last ripple. Your spirit is simply present, like the single candle flame, unwavering in the peaceful dark. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to become. You are already home. You are already whole. This moment, this breath, is the complete and perfect offering. From all of us at Monk's Temple, we thank you for your gentle attention. May the peace you feel now linger long after this voice fades. May you carry the quiet confidence of the willow, the resilience of the woven anchor, and the humble light of the candle into your dreams and your waking world. You are safe. You are at peace. Now, let the final words dissolve into the silence from which they came, leaving you in the deep, restorative quiet of your own being. Sleep in profound peace. In a village known for its vibrant tapestries, there were two weavers. The first, Eris, worked in the town square. People could watch her skilled hands, the swift shuttle, the emerging pattern. She wove stories of great battles and festivals, and crowds would gather to admire her visible mastery. The second weaver, Leora, worked in a small, quiet shed at the edge of the forest. Her door was often closed. She produced fewer tapestries, and they were simpler, abstract patterns of color and texture that evoked feeling more than narrative. Villagers respected her work but were less impressed by the process, which they couldn't see. One year, a great dampness plagued the village. Mold crept into homes, spoiling food and cloth. In the square, Eris's magnificent tapestries, woven tightly with complex threads, absorbed the moisture. The colors bled, the fibers rotted, and her masterpieces were ruined. But in Leora's shed, her tapestries remained intact. When people asked how, she invited them to look closely. Her work was woven with a different technique, looser, with intentional small gaps between the threads. The dampness must move, she explained. If it is trapped, it destroys. If it can pass through, it simply visits and moves on. My teacher called it weaving the space as importantly as the thread. She held one up to the window. Light and air passed freely through the fabric. Eris wove against the world, creating a barrier of beauty. I weave with the world, creating a fabric that allows it to breathe. My skill was not in the density of the pattern, but in the wisdom of the gaps. The village elder nodded. We valued the spectacle of creation. But true resilience was being crafted in the quiet shed, in the spaces we could not see. Remember this in your own life: what you leave uncluttered, what you leave open for breath, may be what saves you when the dampness comes. A boy named Leo received a magnificent kite for his birthday. It was painted like a dragon, with long, flowing tails. Eager to see it soar, he took it to a high hill on a windy day. He let out the string, and the kite shot into the sky, climbing higher and higher. Leo cheered, thrilled by its freedom. But then, a thought occurred to him. If the string is holding it back, imagine how high it could go without it. With a defiant grin, he took his pocket knife and cut the string. For a glorious, heart-stopping moment, the kite soared even higher, dancing wildly on the wind. Leo watched in triumph. But his triumph was short-lived. Without the tension of the string, the kite lost its purchase on the wind. It tumbled, spun, and then plummeted, crashing to earth in a torn, broken heap. An old farmer, tending a nearby field, had watched it all. He walked over as Leo stared, devastated, at the ruins of his kite. You thought the string was a restraint, didn't you, lad? The farmer asked gently. Leo could only nod, tears in his eyes. Ah, the farmer sighed. It was not a restraint. It was a relationship. The wind pushes, the string pulls. That tension is what gives the kite its place in the sky. It's what allows it to climb. No string, no flight. Just a fall. He placed a weathered hand on Leo's shoulder. Freedom isn't the absence of connection. It's the right kind of connection. One that provides gentle tension, a loving pull that grounds us even as we soar. Remember that when you feel something tugging at you. It might not be holding you down. It might be the very thing keeping you aloft. During a harsh famine, a wanderer arrived at a village where every door was locked, every cupboard guarded. The people, though starving, hoarded their last scraps in fearful isolation. The wanderer set a large pot in the village square, filled it with water from the well, and built a small fire beneath it. Then, with great ceremony, he pulled an ordinary, smooth stone from his pack and placed it in the pot. Curious villagers peered from their windows. "What are you doing?" one finally called out. "I am making stone soup," the wanderer announced. A magical soup that feeds the spirit first, then the body. It's almost perfect. Though it would be even better with just one small carrot. After a long silence, a woman emerged, clutching a single, wilted carrot. "I have this," she said shyly, adding it to the pot. "Marvelous," said the wanderer, stirring. "Now, it just needs a hint of onion to unlock the flavor." A man appeared with a small, wrinkled onion. One by one, drawn by the growing aroma and the shared act, villagers emerged with their meager offerings. A pinch of salt, a few herbs, a handful of barley, a potato. The pot, started with just a stone and water, became a rich, hearty stew, enough to feed everyone. As they shared the meal, the wanderer said, "You see? The stone was just an excuse. The real magic was not in the pot, but in your willingness to believe in a possibility together. The famine was in your larders, but the true starvation was in your isolation. You had the ingredients for community all along. You just needed a reason to bring them out." The stone was kept in the square as a reminder: abundance is often hidden, waiting to be summoned not by a leader's command, but by a shared, simple idea. At the entrance to a peaceful city stood two gates, side by side. The gate of achievement was grand, ornate, and busy. To pass through, one had to declare their accomplishments, their titles, their wealth. Many clamored here, polishing their stories. The gate of surrender was simple, plain wood, often covered in ivy. To pass through, one had to lay down any burden they carried, a worry, a grudge, a pretense, a title. There was no line at this gate. A successful merchant, laden with gold and anxiety, approached the city. He naturally went to the gate of achievement. The gatekeeper listened to his list of accomplishments, then said, "You may enter, but all you have declared, you must now defend. Your stay will be a continual proving ground." The merchant felt a wave of exhaustion at the thought. He looked at the quiet gate of surrender. On a whim, he walked over. The keeper there simply asked, "What will you lay down?" The merchant thought. He placed his heavy money bag on the ground. Then, haltingly, he said, "My fear of failure." He stepped through the gate, feeling strangely lighter, though poorer. Inside the city, he found a different world. People greeted him as a person, not a title. Conversations were about ideas, not deals. He discovered he could breathe. He found work he loved, not for gold, but for joy. Years later, he met the keeper of the gate of surrender again. "I thought I was giving everything up," the merchant said. "But I received everything that mattered." The keeper smiled. The gate of achievement asks you to become heavier to enter. This gate asks you to become lighter. The city was always the same. The only thing that changed was what you chose to carry across its threshold. There was a valley so shaped by wind and stone that it created a perfect echo. Whatever sound was made in its center returned threefold. For generations, villagers used it to settle disputes. Two parties in conflict would be brought to the valley and asked to speak their piece to the cliffs. One day, two farmers, brothers, were locked in a bitter argument over land. The elder shouted his grievances into the valley, you are selfish. You took what was mine. The echo roared back, selfish. Took what was mine. Mine. The words, multiplied and amplified, sounded even uglier, shocking the speaker. The younger brother, stung, yelled back, "You are greedy and controlling." The echo thundered, "Greedy. Controlling. Controlling." The village elder then stepped forward. He did not address the brothers. Instead, he faced the cliffs and said in a calm, clear voice, "Let there be understanding." The echo returned, softer but pervasive, "Understanding, understanding, understanding." He then said, "Let there be shared ground." The echo carried it, shared ground, shared ground. The brothers, listening to these new echoes filling their old, angry ones, fell silent. The elder turned to them. "You came to throw your words at each other. But the valley does not care who speaks. It only returns the quality of the sound it receives. Throw sharp words, and you are wounded by their return. Offer the sound of peace, and peace is what surrounds you. The choice is not in your brother's ear. It is in your own mouth." Chastened, the brothers spoke again, this time with care. Their words of compromise and apology were returned to them as a gentle chorus, weaving a new atmosphere in the ancient space. The argument was not won. It was dissolved by the acoustic law of the valley: you must listen to what you choose to send out. At the edge of a vast and ancient forest, two paths began. One was the main trail, wide, clear, and marked by signs pointing to popular vistas like Sunset Peak and Echo Falls. It was well traveled, its dirt packed firm by countless boots. The other was barely a path at all, a slight parting in the ferns, a suggestion made by deer. It had no sign. The locals called it the uncarved path. A traveler named Eli, armed with a detailed map, confidently took the main trail. He reached the promised vistas, took the expected photographs, and returned by afternoon, his checklist complete. It was satisfying, but somehow the forest felt like a museum he had walked through, not a place he had met. The next day, curious, he stood before the uncarved path. With no destination, he stepped into the green shade. Here, the forest was different. He had to move slowly, attentively. He noticed the patterns of moss on bark, the conversation of unseen birds, the way the light fell in shifting dapples. He sat by a stream no map named, and for a time, thought of nothing at all. He returned to the village at dusk, muddy and quiet. An old woodsman sat whittling by a fire. "You found the uncarved path," he said, not a question. "I did," Eli replied. "But I didn't go anywhere in particular." The woodsman smiled. "Ah. The main trail leads you to a place on the land. The uncarved path leads you to a place in yourself. One shows you what others have declared worthy. The other asks you to discover what you find worthy. You didn't go nowhere. You went into the presence of the forest, and in doing so, you met your own capacity for presence. Not every journey needs a named destination. Some simply need a sincere departure." Eli kept no photographs from that second walk. But the feeling of the stream's sound and the cool, quiet air stayed with him longer than any vista. He had learned that the deepest discoveries are not of places, but of the quality of attention one brings to any place. A lighthouse stood on a treacherous coast, its beam powered by a complex array of glass prisms and lenses, the Fresnel lens. This apparatus was a masterpiece, capturing and bending the light of a single lamp into a powerful beam visible for 20 miles. A new keeper, a practical man named Finn, was awed by the lens. He cleaned it with reverence, understanding it was the reason ships were saved. One night, a terrible storm raged. The lamp flame, buffeted by drafts, flickered wildly. The magnificent lens now projected not a steady beam, but a frantic, stuttering strobe across the chaotic sea. From his post, Finn saw the lights of a ship caught in the swells, confused by the erratic signal. In a moment of instinct, he did the unthinkable. He took a thick woolen blanket and draped it over most of the great lens, leaving only one small, clear panel exposed. Now, from that single panel, a narrow, unwavering beam of constant light pierced the storm. It was less impressive, less far-reaching, but it was stable. It was true. The ship's lights adjusted, finding a course, and moved slowly but surely toward safe harbor. After the storm, Finn was questioned. Why would he obscure the great lens? He explained. The lens is designed for a steady flame. In the chaos, its perfection became a liability, it amplified the instability. A small, consistent truth is a better guide than a magnificent, flashing confusion. I chose clarity over complexity. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is not to amplify all of our light, but to focus what little we have that is steady, and let that one true beam lead the way. The lesson was recorded in the keeper's log. Better a single candle held steady than a chandelier swinging in the storm. A wide, slow river divided a land. Over generations, the people on the West Bank became master builders. They constructed towering mills, efficient canals, and strong bridges partway across the river. They believed progress meant conquering the water's flow, harnessing it completely. The people on the East Bank became observers. They built their homes on stilts to accommodate floods, planted willows to stabilize the soil, and learned the river's moods. They believed progress meant adapting to the water's flow, dancing with its changes. A century of storms and droughts passed. The West Bank's imposing constructions, fighting the river's natural movements, required constant, exhausting repair. Dams silted up, canals cracked, and their partial bridges were repeatedly washed away. The East Bank's simpler settlements weathered the changes. The willows held the banks. The stilt houses rose with the floods. They lived with less dramatic efficiency, but with greater resilience. A great elder from the West Bank, weary of the endless struggle, finally crossed in a boat to visit the East. "How have you survived so well with so little effort?" he asked. An East Bank elder gestured to the flowing water. "You see the river as an opponent to be pinned down. We see it as a teacher with a constantly changing lesson. You built to resist. We built to respond. Resistance is a continuous battle. Response is a continuous conversation. You aimed for mastery, which is fragile. We aimed for understanding, which is durable. The West Bank elder looked at his own tired, imposing structures, then at the gentle, adaptable village. He understood, sustainability is not about greater force, but about wiser flexibility. You cannot defeat a river. You can only learn its language and build your life in the vocabulary of cooperation. In a monastery, each novice was given a plain ceramic cup upon entry. It was to be their lifelong companion for tea and water. A young novice, Brother Leo, cherished his. One day, washing it at the well, it slipped from his hand and shattered on the stones. Heartbroken, he gathered the pieces. The master potter of the monastery saw his distress. "Bring me the pieces," he said. Leo did, expecting a reprimand. Instead, the potter studied the shards. This clay was from the north field, he mused. Good, strong material. For weeks, the potter worked in secret. On the day of the monastery's silent retreat, the potter presented Leo with a new cup. It was unmistakably made from the old one. The potter had ground the shards into a fine powder, mixed it with new clay from the south field, and fired a new vessel. It was streaked with beautiful, subtle patterns where the old and new clays met, a visual history of breakage and renewal. "This is your cup," the potter said. "Not a replacement. A continuation. The old cup is not gone. It is the foundation of the new. In our tradition, we do not hide our breaks. We make them the source of new strength and beauty. Your carelessness is forgiven. Your brokenness is now part of your cup story, and thus, part of yours. Carry it without shame." Leo drank from the mended cup for decades. Its unique pattern served as a daily reminder: what is broken can become the material for what is whole, and the seams of our repair can be the most beautiful part of the design. In a remote abbey, the choir was famous. Their harmonies were so precise they seemed to touch the divine. But the choir director, Sister Therese, grew troubled. The singers had become technicians of tone, focused on perfect blend and pitch, but the joy had faded from their eyes. One Advent, she gave a shocking instruction. "For this season," she said, "we will not sing the hymns. We will learn them, feel them, live them. But in the service, we will only mouth the words. We will be a silent choir." The singers were confused, but obeyed. For weeks, they practiced in silence, focusing on the meaning of each word, the emotion behind each line. They learned to communicate the music through their posture, their breath, their expression. When the first service came, the congregation was bewildered to see the choir standing with no sound coming forth. But as they watched, something shifted. They saw the profound intention on the singers' faces, the collective swell of a breath before a crescendo that never audibly came, the shared look of peace during a silent Amen. The congregation found themselves hearing the music in their own hearts, more vividly than ever before. After the season, when the choir sang again, their music was transformed. It was no longer just sound. It was soul made audible. The technical perfection remained, but it was now filled with the substance of their silent practice. Sister Therese explained, We had to lose the sound to remember the source of the song. We were making music for the ears. Now we make it from the heart, which speaks first in silence. Do not fear the quiet periods in your life, when your voice seems taken away. That is when you are being tuned to a deeper resonance. What emerges afterward will carry the weight of that silence within it. In a windswept valley lived two sculptors. The first, Eris, built massive stone windmills. He carved elaborate sails that caught the breeze with a satisfying thrum, turning great gears that ground grain and pumped water. His works were monuments to capturing the wind's power, to making it useful. The second sculptor, Kale, worked with reeds, silk, and thin pieces of metal. He created wind harps and mobiles, delicate constructions that did nothing practical. They simply sang or danced when the wind passed through them. Their purpose was to reveal the wind's nature, to make its invisible passage beautiful and audible. A great calm settled over the valley for weeks. Eris's windmills stood silent and still, their purpose unfulfilled. The village grumbled about the lack of ground flour, the stagnant water. But in the stillness, people began to notice Kale's creations. With no strong wind to play them, they discovered a subtler truth. The faintest breath of air, a sigh, a distant thermal, would cause a single chime to whisper, or one metal leaf to quiver. In the profound quiet, they learned to perceive the wind's gentlest presence. Eris, frustrated, asked Kale, "What good is your art when there is no real wind?" Kale pointed to a barely trembling silk thread. "My friend, you built for the wind's shouting. I built for its whispering. You see stillness as failure. I see it as a different kind of listening. Your work celebrates the wind's strength. Mine celebrates its being. Is a mother's lullaby less valuable than her shout? The calm did not break my art, it completed it, by teaching us to appreciate the breath behind the gale." When the winds returned, the village enjoyed both the grinding mills and the singing harps. But they now understood, there are seasons for harnessing force, and seasons for appreciating essence. A life attuned only to power will be bereft in a calm. A life that can find music in a whisper is never without song. On the border between the waking world and the world of dreams stood an old gatekeeper. His duty was not to keep people out, but to help them understand what they brought with them. Each night, as souls approached the gate to enter the dreaming realm, he would ask them a simple question: "What color is your burden?" Some would answer, "Red, like my anger." Others, "Gray, like my worry." A child might say, "Blue, like my sadness from today." The gatekeeper would then hand them a paintbrush of the corresponding color. "You may enter," he'd say, "but you must paint one star in the dream sky with this color before you return." And so, in their dreams, these souls would look up and paint a single star, a crimson star of anger, a slate-gray star of anxiety, a sapphire star of sorrow. Over millennia, the dream sky became a magnificent, swirling tapestry of every color imaginable, a record of every human emotion ever carried into sleep. It was not a dark sky, but a breathtakingly deep and complex one. The burdens had not been discarded, they had been transformed into beauty. A weary philosopher once asked the gatekeeper, "Why not just take their burdens away?" why make them paint? The gatekeeper smiled, gesturing to the glorious nebula of stars. If I took it away, they would learn nothing, and the sky would be empty. This way, they perform a simple, creative act with their feeling. They externalize it, see it as part of a vast, beautiful whole, and leave it there when they wake. They learn that even their pain has a place in the cosmos, that it can contribute to wonder. A burden released is just gone. A burden transformed becomes art, and art becomes part of everyone's healing. The philosopher looked up at the star he had just painted, a silver streak of confusion, now glittering alongside millions of others. For the first time, his confusion felt less like a prison and more like a note in an infinite symphony. He understood. We are not meant to sleep to escape our feelings, but to learn how to weave them into the larger story. An old gardener named Hector decided to build a low stone wall around his beloved garden. He gathered stones from his land, each one unique. He worked slowly, fitting them together without mortar, relying on balance and patience. He had built 3/4 of the wall when winter came early, halting his work. The wall stood with a clear, jagged gap facing the eastern woods. Hector saw it as a failure, an unfinished task that marred the garden's perfection all winter long. But when spring arrived, he noticed something. Through that gap, deer would step softly into the garden at dawn to drink from his birdbath. Rabbits would peer in. Birds he'd never seen before used the opening as a flight path to his feeders. The broken wall had become a gateway for the wild world he loved. He sat on his porch one morning, watching a fox kid explore the gap before darting back to its mother. He realized he had been building a wall to define a space as his. But the unfinished portion had redefined it as a part of. He never placed the last stone. That intentional gap became the wall's most important feature, an invitation. His garden was no longer an isolated sanctuary, but a welcoming clearing in a larger conversation with the forest. He told his grandson, "I set out to build a barrier to keep some things out. Life, in its wisdom, left an opening to let other things in. Perfection would have been a complete circle, a closed idea. This flaw made it a living place." Remember, in your own life, the walls you build to feel safe. Leave a gate in them, not by accident, but on purpose. The unfinished part may be where the grace gets in. In a village of potters, there was an ancient kiln, older than anyone's memory. It was uneven, with hot spots and cool spots, and its door didn't seal perfectly. Most potters avoided it, using newer, more predictable kilns that gave uniform results. But one potter, Eliza, loved the old kiln. She would load her pieces carefully, studying its idiosyncrasies. A vase placed near the back might come out with a dramatic, unexpected glaze run. A bowl near the front might be kissed with a unique ash pattern from the drafty door. Her work was unpredictable, but when it succeeded, it possessed a character and depth that the uniform pieces lacked. Other potters called it luck. "You can't reproduce those results," they'd say. Eliza would smile. "I'm not trying to reproduce. I'm trying to collaborate. The new kiln is a tool I command. The old kiln is a partner I listen to. It has a voice, a temperament. My skill is not in imposing my will, but in having a conversation with the fire and the clay and the flaws of this old chamber. The flaws are where the kiln's spirit enters the pot. One day, a great collector came to the village, seeking not perfection, but soul. He saw Eliza's work, each piece a unique record of a conversation between intention and chance. He declared her the true master. The others seek control, he said. She seeks dialogue. Control gives you consistency. Dialogue gives you life. A perfect kiln makes identical pots. An imperfect kiln, in the hands of a listening heart, makes living art. Eliza's work reminded them that true beauty often emerges not in spite of unpredictability, but because of it. At the center of a forgotten town square stood a deep, dry well. It was said that if you leaned over its mossy rim and spoke a name, any name, the well would not echo the name back. Instead, after a moment's pause, it would whisper a single word that was that person's hidden essence. A vain mayor once shouted his own name down the well, expecting powerful or great. The well whispered back, lonely. A wealthy merchant tried her name, hoping for successful. The well returned, anxious. A fierce warrior growled his name, anticipating strong. The well sighed, tired. People grew afraid of the well's uncomfortable truth and avoided it. Then, a quiet woman who tended the town's flower beds approached. She had lost her only son years ago. Gently, she spoke his name into the dark shaft. Her voice was soft, full of love. The well was silent for a long time. Then, clear as a bell, it echoed back not a word, but a sound, the pure, joyful laughter of a child. The woman wept, but they were tears of release. She had not spoken to conjure a hidden flaw, but to remember a lost essence. The well had answered in kind. A sage who witnessed this explained, the well does not define people. It reflects the question in the heart of the one who calls. The mayor asked from ego and heard his isolation. The merchant asked from fear and heard her unease. The mother asked from love and heard love's eternal signature. The well is just a vessel for the truth you already carry about what you name. Be careful what you seek when you name another, or yourself, for you will always hear the quality of your own seeking echoed back to you. And so, dear listener, we arrive at the end of our shared journey through these quiet tales. The gatekeeper has asked his question, the last star has been painted in the dream sky, the final, deliberate gap has been left in the garden wall. Let the images soften now, like pebbles settling to the bottom of a clear pond. There is no need to hold them. Their work is complete. They have gently brushed against the walls of your perception, leaving behind not instructions, but resonances, a feeling for the unfinished, an appreciation for the whisper, a trust in the collaborative flaw. Feel the deep, full silence that has been growing between these stories. This silence is the old kiln, the well of echoing names. It is not empty. It holds the space where your own truth can resonate. It is the partner in your final conversation tonight. You have traveled from windmills to wind harps, from burdened gates to gates of surrender. You have seen that a string is not a restraint, but a relationship that enables flight. You have learned that a community's feast can begin with a single, shared stone. Now, let it all go. Release the metaphors. Allow the mind to cease its gentle wandering. There is nothing more to understand, nowhere further to go. Your body is profoundly heavy, embraced by rest. Your breath is the slow, steady tide of your being. Your awareness is the vast, star-strewn sky of the dream gatekeeper, holding every color of your experience within its peaceful expanse. You are the unfinished wall with its perfect, welcoming gap. You are the cup, beautifully remade from your own breaks. You are the silent choir, full of music waiting in the quiet. From all of us here at Monk's Temple, we thank you for your presence, your listening, your gentle attention. May the peace you have cultivated here remain as a soft light in your days, a resilient flexibility in your spirit, and a compassionate openness in your heart. You are safe. You are whole. You are home. Now, let the last word dissolve into the silence that gave it birth. Surrender completely to the deep, healing darkness, and the boundless peace that resides within it. Sleep in profound and utter peace. Good night.